I don't know what you would say is the #1 source of pollution in the Hudson and the harbor. I think PCBs, there's certainly a long, dramatic story there, but from my perspective, it's not PCBs. I would say arguably the worst form of pollution in the river is sewage. The reason I say that is that I use the river, the harbor recreationally, so I'm in the water a lot, and to me the #1 risk is from pathogens, from bacteria and viruses that can make you sick. And PCBs are also in the water. They're really more on the bottom than they are in the water column itself. They're on the bottom. They get, like other toxins, they get absorbed by small life forms and eaten by bigger ones. And if we eat the fish or the crabs from the river, then we are at risk of accumulating those toxins, and they can make us sick over the long run. But pathogens, germs, basically, can make you sick right away. And so for me, that's the biggest concern. So, you know, what is the worst form of pollution is really an open question. So my group is called New York City Water Trail Association. And what is a water trail? It's a network of spots where you can put your boat, whatever kind of boat you have, you can put in the water and you can go to the next spot. And it forms a kind of it's more of a network than a trail, and then it's not linear. But there are now about 60 spots around the harbor where you can legally launch a human-powered boat, which is a kayak or a canoe or a rowing boat. And so this is a beach underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't know how many of you have been down there, but there is an actual beach. It's the only real sandy beach in Lower Manhattan. It's right under the Brooklyn Bridge, and we're looking north at the Manhattan Bridge. And this woman is named Dottie Lewandowski. She was, until recently, the Commissioner of Parks for the Borough of Queens. But more importantly for us, she was an avid kayaker, and she's the person who started the water trail. And that was for the city of New York to officially support the idea of a water trail was a really big step, because you can be sure there are a lot of lawyers saying we can't do this, there's so much liability, we can't encourage the public to get into the water. But she, as the borough commissioner for Queens, said yes, we can do that and we will do that, and she had enough pull to make it happen. That was in 2008. This boat, by the way, this boat was built on 14th Street at the New School as part of a college course on the Hudson River. So it's a Whitehall gig. That's exactly what that is. Yep. It's called Storm Queen instead of Storm King. It's kind of a play on the mountain. Okay. So this was the first thing that we did. So the group was organized, but it was smaller than this group. It was probably just 5 or 6 of us. And the first thing we did was we made a map of all the spots that you could legally launch. And this was back in 2008, so there weren't that many. There were 3 on Staten Island, and there were a couple in Jamaica Bay, and there was one here, Valentino Park, and there were the piers in Hudson River Park, and then we had one launch over here on Newtown Creek, and one on the Gowanus, and some up there, but not that many. But we made a map, and we thought, okay, well that's a great thing to hand out. That will encourage people to think about this and to start to use it. And it was fun to make and pretty cheap. And so we were happy. And we thought, well, they're just going to add more sites year after year. We should think about safety. That's important. Education, encourage people not to just buy a kayak at Walmart and put it in the harbor, but to start kayaking through an organized group, through a community boathouse where people know what's going on. And that way you're trained by people who understand how the whole harbor works. And that's really still our method, is to try and drive people towards organized groups and not to just go it alone. And actually, most people won't put a boat in the harbor by themselves without knowing anything. That's actually really rare. People they know just by looking at it that it's not a smart thing to do. Anyway, 2011, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a fire at the wastewater treatment plant up in Harlem. It's called the North River plant. And it was a really catastrophic fire, and they had to take the whole plant offline, meaning they had to throw the switch and stop the sewage from coming into the plant. And that means that it had to bypass from the pipes into the river. And it was the hottest weekend of the year, and nobody knew what was going on, especially the DEP, the agency that runs the wastewater treatment system. They had no idea where and how. They didn't know how much, they didn't know where it was coming out, but there was sewage all up and down the Hudson as far south as the Village and all the way up and around the Harlem River. But no real information, no solid information of how much or how polluted the water was, just that out of an abundance of caution, The city said it is better not to get in the water this weekend until further notice. Hottest weekend of the summer. And that was really, really upsetting to us. Not because it happened, accidents happen, but because the city had no idea of what the consequences were or how polluted the harbor was. So just to back up, I think some of you might have seen this slide before, but this is a slide that's about the way our sewer system works. It's called a combined sewer system, so that means that on a normal, like a good day like today, this is your apartment building, you flush your toilet, the sewage comes down and it goes into the sewer pipe, it takes the bend and it goes off this way to the treatment plant. And we have a great system of sewage treatment plants that can handle all of our sewage for 8 million people as long as it doesn't rain. But when it rains, that water comes down the downspout, it comes down the storm drains in the street and the gutters, and it combines in the same pipe with everything that you are flushing or running out of all the sanitary waste from your house is mixing with the storm water in the same pipe, and there is no pipe big enough to handle all that water. Because New York City is impermeable. We've paved the whole thing over, we've roofed it over, we have some trees, a few, but not nearly enough. And so the volume of flow is so huge that it has to bypass to the harbor. And that's why on rainy days, water quality really takes a turn for the worse. Okay, so that's the basic problem.
You say when it's raining, it bypasses, but it looks like some water goes to the treatment.
Yes, the treatment plants actually increase their capacity. They go over 100% capacity to try and handle as much as they can. So they're doing their best, but the volume is so huge that, I mean, the figure is about 30 billion gallons a year of combined sewage and stormwater are discharged into the harbor. 30 billion. So it's a really big number. And it has an impact on water quality, obviously. So yep, sure. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that at the end, but absolutely, there's an absolute relationship, and it's discouraging. So you can't see any of those numbers. It just looks like a spreadsheet, right? Yeah. Well, that's what we got when we said, can you show us, can we see your water quality results from because the city does test. They test at 80 different places in the harbor, and they test every week. So they're testing for sewage pollution. They have a pretty good system, actually. But the problem with their system, from our perspective, was we couldn't understand it. We couldn't interpret it. It just looked like that, just like sheets and sheets of numbers with no key, no guide, no way to understand it. So we thought we could do better. And so we started, and I also want to show you this is a map of all the places where they test. So you can see they really test quite a bit up here in Jamaica Bay because there's 4 treatment plants on Jamaica Bay. They're concerned about Jamaica Bay. They test in the Gowanus at 3 places. They test in Newtown Creek at 4 places. But look, in the whole East River, from Governor's Island all the way up to Hellgate, they test in 1 spot. So they're not testing, and they test a few spots over here on the Hudson, but we're concerned, this is a big recreational passage now, and there's just 1 spot where the city tests. We don't think that that's enough. So we thought, well, we can test at places they're not testing, and we can also relay our results in a way that's more understandable than the way they do. Okay, I don't want to dwell on the science of it, but what we decided to test for is called an indicator bacteria. So in the human body, there are obviously millions of different kinds of germs and pathogens, and to test for all of them would be literally impossible. And even to test for a dozen of them would be expensive, and so nobody does that. What the city does at the bathing beaches, and what we decided to do, is we test for one thing, one bacteria that's in everybody's gut. It's called Enterococcus, and it's considered the most reliable indicator of sewage pollution. In other words, if it's there, it's likely that there is sewage pollution in the water. That Enterococcus itself won't hurt you. It's in your body. It's part of your body. But it indicates that there is sewage, and that sewage could conceivably contain pathogens that could make you sick. So that's what we test for. And we decided to obviously to test near shore instead of mid-channel. Many of the city sites are mid-channel. We wish that we could test instantly. Nobody can test instantly for bacteria. You have to take a sample and you have to culture it. Traditionally, it's 24 hours, and after 24 hours, you've grown the culture and you'll see if that bacteria is present. But you can't just dip a piece of paper in the water and say, oh yes, there's bacteria here. It doesn't work that way. Now there's new technology. They're sort of shrinking that 24 hours down to 8 hours, some cases 6 hours even, but it's very expensive. The city doesn't use that. They use the old 24-hour incubation period, and that's what we do, same thing. And we struggled to understand all the different standards, but we finally went with the city's own standards for bathing beaches. So if you go to Coney Island or something like that, they have a system at Coney Island, a green, yellow, red system. Green meaning it's good, yellow meaning it's shaky and in the middle, and red meaning they have to close the beach, and we went with that same system. So this is our lab. This is the first lab that we use at the River Project. I think some of you know that place on Pier 40 right over here. And a very humble laboratory, just a table with an incubator and a bunch of volunteers and a lab director, Nina. And those are the samples being prepared there. You dip your sample at your site. You pipette 10 milliliters out. You mix some reagent, which is sugar, basically food. And you pour it into an ice tray-like thing with a lot of wells in it, and you put that in an incubator. I'll show you a picture of when it comes out, you have these. Imagine these as 5 ice trays, and there are about 100 wells on each tray. The system that we use uses a fluorescent dye. If this particular bacteria is present, it metabolizes that sugar, and you see the result as a fluorescing well. So in a sample like this with 2 wells illuminated, or like this with 7 or 8 wells illuminated, these samples would indicate swimmable water, maybe an advisory situation, but these, which are almost entirely illuminated, indicate a really, really contaminated sample. And if this were from a bathing beach, that beach would have to be closed. So that's what we're looking for in our sampling. And so we made a map, an online map, and we started to test at all these sites. This is actually 2015, so this was already 3 years into it, and we had, by then, about 30 sites probably. And all the samplers were volunteers. And just zeroing in, so we added a lot more sampling sites. Remember I showed you that picture of the East River, and the city had 1 sampling site here, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On that same stretch, we have 10 sites to their 1. So we feel like we have a lot more data than they do and a better picture of what's really happening. If you go onto this online map, you can find it online, and you just take your cursor and you just click. If you click on one of these, like that Brooklyn Bridge Beach site, this is what comes up, and there's 2,000, the latest results, the results from the year before, and results from the year before. You can just click on it, and when you click through, you get a spreadsheet that looks like this. And oh, the colors are really way off there. Wow, that is tough. Wow. You know what's funny? Those colors are actually exactly backwards, and I don't know why that is. So you have to imagine, this is Inwood Canoe Club up above the George Washington Bridge. It's funny. And everything that's orange here is supposed to be green, and these 2 greens are actually supposed to be red. So this idea of slideshow isn't going to be so clear. But that means that out of 20 weekly tests, they only failed twice. So that's a pretty good spot. That means it's a spot you could swim at. And this is the Gowanus Canal. It's showing all green, but it's actually entirely red. Oh wow, I have never had this happen to me before. And you can kind of see in this little image here, all the numbers are red. Wow. Okay. And it is, and I don't know how to do that. So this is exactly backwards. But I want to show you. This is all of the sites together in one. But we also have what we call the all sites table. This is the rainfall indicated here, and you can see that. In the preceding week, in the 3 days right before sampling, there was a good deal of rainfall. And the result is that this is all red. I mean, no, it's all green, but you have to imagine it being all red. basically the whole harbor was polluted. And here again is another week where almost every site was over the limit because of the rainfall there. I mean, that's the story with the harbor. If it's rained, you probably don't want to go swimming. If it hasn't rained, like today, totally swimmable. Almost everywhere in the harbor except the extremities like Newtown Creek and the Gowanus. But everywhere else, you could swim, according to the city's own standards, swimmable. So, well, that's a separate issue. That's a really good question. And so that's one reason that we started to collect all this data, because it really is going to take years of data to understand how long does it take each different spot to clear. There's a lot of factors. There's wind, there's tide, and there's the shape of the landform at that spot. So, but as a general rule, I would say, after looking at the numbers for 8 years, that the main channels of the East River and the Hudson River will clear in less than 12 hours after a pretty big storm, and after a major storm, maybe in a day. Whereas the tributaries, Newtown Creek, Bronx River, Flushing Creek, Coney Island Creek, will take 2 or even 3 days to clear. So, you know, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It does make sense, but
What frequency do you sample?
we sample 1 day a week. We sample every Thursday in season, so starting in May and ending in October. And that's because that's the recreational season. And we do it on the same day because we don't have any money, really. And we're asking a favor of all these labs. We have 10 labs that process for us. And we don't want to be bringing them samples every day and having them to have to assign people. So they assign a person 1 day a week for a couple of hours to handle our stuff. And and we like Thursday because then we can publish the results on Friday right before the weekend, and people can see, oh, this is the latest information. So that's how we do it. One thing that's been interesting about this color thing is going to drive me crazy, but this is our site here. We test on the beach at Stuyvesant Cove. So this is 20th Street coming down. This is the FDR. 20th Street, there's a little tiny beach there, and that's a good spot to launch a kayak from. So we think this is a good potential future boating spot. Let's test there. This is the single, the city's sampling site out in the middle of the river, and we thought, well, let's compare those numbers. They're testing once a week too. Let's compare their numbers to our numbers. So we did a graph, and the city's numbers here, DEP numbers, are these blue diamonds, although they weren't blue when I made the graph, but anyway. And the green squares are our results. And I think you can see mid-channel, most of their readings are right down there at the bottom, less than 20. You know, that's all swimmable. Our results are a little bit higher, and then quite a bit higher, and then we have some big pollution events here. They have a couple of high numbers, 1 or 2, but in general our numbers are higher because we're testing near shore. Near shore is where the stuff comes out of the pipe. Mid-channel is where the current is flushing things a couple times a day. So same thing here. This is West Harlem. That's that wastewater treatment plant that, and again, you know, it's a subtle difference, but our numbers are definitely higher than their numbers. And so we're saying, you know, maybe you should redesign your testing system to take into account the fact that people are going to be using the harbor more and more. Their argument for testing the same sites that they've always tested is that they have years, decades of data, and by comparing the same sites year after year, they get a clear picture overall of the progress or lack of progress. And that's a good argument, but we're saying, you have a new mission now, and that's people are starting to use the water in the upper harbor, and you have to expand your testing. And they're saying we don't have any money, you know, the usual. Yeah.
But aren't there more favorable numbers giving an inaccurate read potential?
Their numbers. I think they are. I think they're just not useful for people who want to use the harbor.
And they won't change their sites. They don't care about.
Let's say that it's a long conversation, and you know, at first they weren't interested at all. Now I think they're listening, but what actually happens remains to be seen.
Okay.
But I think that the fact that we have these numbers and we can show them the numbers really makes a difference. We're not just a bunch of cranks coming in there and saying, you know what, you're not doing a good job. Here's exactly where the hot spots are and the real problems are. Okay, so now here, you know, one more. We couldn't compare. We had terrible numbers at this spot. This is called Hallett's Cove. It's in Astoria. It's opposite the northern tip of Roosevelt Island. That's Randall's Island up there. So that's called Hallett's Cove. That's a great spot to put people in kayaks because it's protected. The current here is the strongest in the whole harbor around here, but in this cove there's a big back eddy and it's a really protected place. It's great for boating. So we tested there and our numbers were always high whether it rained or not. Always red. Why are they red when it's not raining? What's up with that? What's the problem? And we compared our numbers. You can see they're quite a bit higher than the nearest city location. Anyway, it turns out after many years of saying to them, you need to do an investigation because there's something wrong here, they found that one of the apartment buildings at Hallett's Cove was not connected to the sewer at all, but was draining straight into the harbor. It had never been connected to the sewer. It was just straight into the storm drain and right out into the water. So we felt vindicated that we discovered this problem, we'd really pushed it, and they finally did an investigation and found this thing that they fixed.
And what happened thereafter?
The numbers are better. They're not perfect, but they're definitely better since they did those repairs. So there's the sewage, they reconnected the building to the sewer line the way it was supposed to be. Now there are a lot of places like that around the city where buildings are illegally disconnected.
Who owns that building?
That was a NYCHA house. So, but the most egregious case of this happened in Coney Island, down in Coney Island, at a place called Beach Haven. It had Beach Haven had They had 10 or 11 buildings and something like 2,000 apartments, and that entire complex was intentionally disconnected from the sewer. Nobody knows when. And so Coney Island Creek was getting filled. They were getting the waste of 2,000 apartments directly into the creek every day. Nobody knows how long it went on. It is interesting that Donald Trump's father built Beach Haven, and it was the first project that Donald Trump supervised as took on as his own as a developer. But I don't think that actually that was a decision that was made at that point. I think it happened later, and nobody knows whether it happened under the Trump ownership or under the subsequent ownership. Nobody knows, and I don't think it'll ever be known. I suspect that it was it was a blockage of some kind, and the down in Coney Island is very flat, and so there's a lot of pumping involved to move sewage along through the pipes, and so there was just a lot more mechanical effort involved to get the building to pump into the system, whereas if they just let it run into the storm sewer, there's no machinery involved at all. Just savings of money. Not really so much because of us, but because of Riverkeeper, who has really helped us out with this, technical advice and support. The state did pass a sewage pollution right to know law, which means that there is a discharge, you have to be informed. You can sign up for text alerts now, and if there's an accident at a plant, they have to announce it within a certain period of time, 24 or 48 hours, which is they never used to have to say anything. So those are all good changes. There's still some problems. There's still some major problems. The city has what they call a long-term control plan to get a grip on this CSO. CSO means combined sewage overflow. They have this mandate from the state, you must create a long-term control plan. And when you look at the details of the plans, they're very discouraging. If you read the fine print of this last sentence, what it essentially says is that the Gowanus Canal complies with the demands of the Clean Water Act. It says that it meets the standards, and that is just patently untrue. There's just no way that you could say, and again, you have to imagine that that's all red instead of all green, but those are the results from the Gowanus in 2015, and it's essentially the same now. It's the same kinds of numbers. So there's just a long way to go. I mean, and this is really the last thing that here we go again. It's the same, it's exactly backwards. But this is just a quick graph we did this today actually. 2012, 2014, 2016, and last year 2018. And this kind of goes to that point you made about rainfall. So these are the positive or swimmable results on the left-hand graph. They should be green, but okay, let's just imagine this is a good graph. So most of the results, the majority, about 50% were positive that first year. Still, the majority positive that second year. The third year, really a pretty good year. But last year, 2018, it rained 65 inches in New York, well, almost 20 inches more than normal. It was the first time that we had 50% of our results were failures. So it was really bad, and this year is also a wet year. We're about 5 or 6 inches ahead of normal right now, and the results this year have been terrible. So I think that question is a fundamental question that the city needs to answer. Is you say that you're preparing for climate change. One of the prime features of climate change is going to be more rain, going to be bigger rain events, and your sewage problem is not going to get better under your long-term control plan. It's going to get worse. And that's not a long-term control plan. That is really a key talking point for us, and I don't know how that's all going to play out. That's my last slide, but the last thing I want to say is that nobody wants to take responsibility for this. The Department of Environmental Protection that runs the sewage treatment plants says, look, all our mandate to do is to comply with the state, the regulators' demands, and we're doing that. We've made these long-term control plans, but we're not responsible for people getting in the water, for swimming, for boating. It's not our problem. That's a Department of Health problem. The Department of Health is saying, look, we run the beaches. We're not going to expand our coverage into the upper harbor. You know, our bathing beaches are outside, on the outside of Coney Island, Staten Island. We don't want to have any responsibilities in the inner harbor, so we're not touching this. So there's just a failure of leadership, and nobody wants to take this on. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody's done a study on public health of boaters and swimmers in New York Harbor. There is one study from Chicago, from a long time ago, but nobody's done that here, and it seems like a logical next step. But what I wanted to say is a really interesting issue that's super local to this spot is Gansevoort Peninsula, which is at the end of 14th Street. It's part of Hudson River Park. It's where the sanitation transfer plant used to be, where the fireboat station is. I don't know if you guys know that spot. The water quality is pretty good in Hudson River Park. Swimmable, probably 8 days, 9 days out of 10, depending on the spot. And that south-facing edge of Gansevoort, right where the pipeline is protected from the north, and it's out of the current. If you were to build a bathing beach in Manhattan, that would be the best spot, by far. Of course, the Whitney Museum wants to put their sculpture down in that spot. The Spectra pipeline is there at a very shallow depth. Nobody will actually say publicly how shallow it is, but I think it is not very deep, where it comes up. But that's also the prime spot to build a beach. To build a beach, you have to grade something really long and flat to go into the water. That means you'd have to come back upland and probably nick the top of the pipeline, or you'd have to put fill in the water and fill in a little bit of the harbor. Neither of those things seem possible. You can't move the pipeline because the pipeline is too important, and you can't put fill in the harbor because that's a violation of the Clean Water Act. So a terrible missed opportunity is about to unfold there. You'd have to put some kind of a structure in place to hold the sand there. So you'd have to place some blocks of something. Yeah. But it's really interesting, the park design, and can we design some kind of soft edge in Hudson River Park, some kind of swimmable spot, some kind of swimming beach. On the one hand, all of our numbers say, you know, there's some real problem spots in the harbor, but a lot of our numbers say that on most days in most parts of the harbor you can swim. So we're sort of arguing for two things at the same time. It's hard sometimes. But I think that that's true. If we just could get a better grip on what the water is like at specific spots on specific days, we could use the harbor a lot more. Well, thank you very much.